His breath was warm against my ear, making my pulse race faster than I could control. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, rich, deep, and intoxicating, and it wrapped around me like a secret I shouldn't want. My fingers tightened around the fabric of his shirt, the heat of his body seeping through and making my skin tingle. I told myself to pull away, to keep the distance we'd promised. But when his hand brushed the back of my neck, slow and deliberate, every warning in my head went silent. His lips hovered so close, I could almost taste him. If you're already blushing, you're not ready for what's next. Subscribe now to Cherryboyhearts BL, and don't miss the moments that will make your heart pound, your cheeks burn, and your soul ache for more. Every episode is a promise and a temptation. The rain had stopped just before sunrise, leaving the glass walls of my office streaked with silver droplets. From the 52nd floor of Hashikawa Holdings, the city below looked like a silent, endless grid of steel and light. Tokyo always seemed calmer from up here. I liked that distance, it made it easier to keep people out. I sat behind my desk, tapping the edge of a fountain pen against my palm as I scanned the morning schedule. Meetings, contracts, negotiations, and one interview, a secretary position I had been planning to let HR handle. But last night, for reasons I didn't understand, I told them I would handle this one myself. The door clicked open. My assistant bowed before speaking. "Your 10 o'clock is here, Hashikawa-sama. Send him in." I leaned back in my chair, adjusting the cuffs of my black three-piece suit. It was tailored to fit perfectly, not a wrinkle in sight. My tie was the exact shade of midnight, my shirt a crisp white that reflected the office lights. My reflection in the polished desk showed the same cold, unreadable face I always wore. Then he stepped in. Riku. He wasn't what I expected. A young man in a simple dark blazer and a neatly pressed shirt, but his clothes were clearly inexpensive. He had taken care to look presentable, even though money was obviously tight. His black hair fell a little too long over his forehead, and when he looked up, his eyes caught me off guard. Clear, sharp, a strange mix of nervousness and something else. Pride, maybe? I watched him cross the room. Most people's eyes drop under my stare. His didn't. He bowed deeply. "Good morning, Hashikawa-sama. I'm Riku Tanaka. Thank you for seeing me." "Sit," I said, my voice low. I wasn't trying to sound commanding, but it came naturally. He sat opposite me, the chair making the faintest sound on the polished wood floor. I could smell the faint, clean scent of soap clinging to him, subtle but fresh. I looked over his resume. A small university, part-time jobs, no experience in corporate work. Not impressive on paper, but his handwriting on the application was neat, deliberate. There was discipline in that. "Tell me why you want this job," I said. He didn't rush to answer. His gaze stayed on mine, and for a moment it felt like he was searching my face for something. Like he wasn't afraid to really see me. "I need to work," he said simply. "But not just anywhere. I want to work here because it's Hashikawa Holdings. If I work for the best, I'll become the best." His words weren't smooth or rehearsed, but they were steady, and they hit me harder than they should have. "You know this position requires long hours," I said. "You will follow my schedule. You will answer only to me. You may have to travel without notice. Can you do that?" "Yes." No hesitation. His voice had a warmth to it. Not soft exactly, but steady. I was used to people stammering, over-explaining, flattering me. He didn't. I set his resume down. "Stand up." He blinked, but obeyed. I rose too, walking around the desk until I stood in front of him. From this distance, I noticed details I hadn't from across the room. The faint scar just under his jaw, the way his shoulders stayed squared even though I towered over him, the smoothness of his lips when he pressed them together. I extended my hand. "If you work here, you work for me. That means trust." He looked at my hand for half a second, then took it. The moment our palms met, something shifted. His skin was warm. His grip was firm, not limp like so many others. And neither of us let go right away. My thumb brushed his knuckle. Not on purpose, at least that's what I told myself. And I felt a strange jolt, like a spark up my arm. Our eyes locked. Up close, his pupils were wide, catching the light. A second too long. Then two. I let go first, my fingers reluctant. "You'll start on Monday," I said. He blinked, as if he hadn't expected the decision so fast. Thank you, Hashikawa-sama." I stepped back, keeping my face unreadable even though my mind wasn't as calm as it looked. "That's all. My assistant will give you the details." He bowed again, his gaze lowering for the first time since he walked in. But just before he turned toward the door, he looked at me once more. Just a quick glance, but it felt like he was reading something I didn't want him to see. When the door closed behind him, I stayed standing. My hand still felt the heat from his grip. This was a mistake. A secretary was supposed to be efficient, obedient, and invisible. Riku was none of those things. He was sharp, unafraid, and distracting in a way I hadn't felt in years. I turned toward the glass wall, looking down at the city again. But all I could see was his face, the curve of his mouth, the unshaken steadiness of his eyes. And for the first time in a long while, I caught myself thinking about someone long after they'd left the room. The first week went by quickly, but it wasn't easy for me. I didn't usually notice new employees. They came, they worked, they left. They were tools, important tools, yes, but tools all the same. Riku was different. I told myself it was because he was new and I needed to see if he could keep up with me. But deep down, I knew I was watching him too closely, so I decided to make things clear before there was a problem. That Monday morning, I called him into my office. The sun was still low, spilling warm light across the glass walls and the black lacquer of my desk. Riku stepped in, notebook in hand, bowing politely. "You wanted to see me, Hashikawa-sama?" he asked. I nodded and gestured to the chair opposite me. "Sit." He obeyed, placing the notebook neatly on the desk. His posture was straight, his gaze steady. He was good at pretending not to be nervous. "I'm going to give you some rules," I said, my tone firm. "If you work for me, you follow them exactly. No exceptions." His lips pressed into a thin line, but he nodded. "Understood." "One," I said, holding up a finger. "No personal questions. About my life, my family, my past. Nothing. You are here to work, not to know me." His brow lifted slightly, but he said nothing. "Two," I continued. "No being alone in this office after hours. I stay late sometimes, and I work better without distractions. If your work isn't finished by 6, you finish it from home." He tilted his head just a little, like he wanted to ask why but decided against it. "And 3, I said, my voice dropping without me meaning it to. "No touching. Not me, not my belongings. If something needs to be handed to me, you place it on the desk." "Understood." This time his lips twitched, almost like he was hiding a smile. "Understood, Hashikawa-sama." I held his gaze a second longer than necessary before leaning back. "Good. That's all." He stood, collected his notebook, and bowed again before leaving. But as he turned, I saw the corner of his mouth curve upward, just barely. It irritated me more than it should have. The next few days, I caught myself breaking my own rule, the one I hadn't said out loud. Don't stare. But every time Riku walked past my desk with a stack of papers, every time he leaned over to place a file in front of me, I felt my eyes following him. The crisp lines of his shirt, the way his hair sometimes fell into his eyes when he bent his head, the faint scent of coffee and soap that clung to him. I didn't like losing control over my focus, and he made it harder every day. One afternoon, I called him in to review a set of contracts. My desk was wide, but when we worked together, I preferred to use the small side table by the window. It forced us to sit close, where it was easier to point out details on the same page. He pulled his chair up next to mine, his knee brushing mine under the table. Not hard, just enough to feel. He didn't move it away. Neither did I. "Clause 14, I said, my voice lower than usual. I leaned in, pointing at the paragraph. Our shoulders almost touched. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the faint sound of his breathing. "Yes," he murmured, flipping to the next page. His fingers brushed mine on the paper, quick but enough to make me feel a faint spark shoot up my arm. I told myself it was nothing, just static, just coincidence. That Friday, the office was almost empty after 6. Most employees had gone home. I was still at my desk when I noticed a light on in the break room. I walked over and found Riku there, pouring himself a coffee. He looked up when he saw me. "I was just finishing the last of the finance reports," he said, as if he needed to explain why he was still here. I checked my watch. "You remember rule number 2? He smiled faintly. "Yes, I'll be gone in a minute." I should have told him to leave right then, but instead I found myself walking into the room. The break room was small, with a long counter and a coffee machine in the corner. I stood close enough that I could smell the fresh coffee and the faint soap scent of his skin. "You work too much," I said. He glanced at me over his shoulder. "I could say the same for you." For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt heavier, warmer. Then he stepped past me to leave, and our shoulders brushed, just a light touch, but it stayed with me as he walked away. The real test came the next week. It was late, and we were finishing the quarterly report together in my office. The city lights glowed behind us through the glass wall, and the hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. Riku leaned forward to point at a figure on the page. This part. Our hands moved at the same time, both reaching for the same pen. His fingers closed over mine for just a second. Warm, steady. Neither of us moved immediately. His eyes lifted to meet mine, and for the first time, I couldn't read what was in them. I pulled my hand back slowly. "It's late. Go home." He didn't argue, but as he packed his things, I felt the echo of that touch still in my skin. I had given him 3 rules. He hadn't broken them yet, but I had a sinking feeling I would be the one to break them first. Friday nights in Roppongi were usually loud and annoying. Crowds of people filled the streets, flashing lights from bars and restaurants cut through the dark, and laughter spilled out of every doorway. I didn't like it. I was only there because of a dinner meeting with a potential client. The moment I stepped out of the building, I wanted to go home. That's when I saw him. Riku. He wasn't in a suit tonight. He wore dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves pushed up, and his hair looked a little messy, like the wind had played with it. He was standing near the entrance of a ramen shop, holding a cup of iced tea in one hand. And he wasn't alone. There was a man with him, slightly taller than Riku, smiling too widely, standing too close. They were talking, laughing, leaning toward each other like they shared some private joke. Something tightened in my chest. I stood there for a moment, half hidden behind the corner of the building, watching them. My first thought was, who is he? My second was, why do I care? Riku had the right to talk to whoever he wanted. He had the right to laugh, to relax, to look at someone with that kind of warmth. But watching it happen made something in me turn sharp and restless. I told myself to walk away. I didn't. The taller man touched Riku's arm as they talked, his fingers resting there too long. Riku didn't pull away. That small, casual contact burned in my vision. I clenched my jaw. Finally, they started walking down the street together, side by side, their shoulders brushing in the crowd. I didn't follow. Couldn't. My pride wouldn't allow it. But the image stayed with me all the way home. The next morning, I came into the office early. I didn't want to admit it, but I had spent half the night thinking about what I'd seen. When Riku arrived, cheerful as always, I didn't greet him. "Morning, Hashikawa-sama," he said with that small smile of his. "Report from the finance team," I said flatly, without looking up from my computer. "Now." He blinked, a little surprised, but went to get it. The rest of the day went like that. Short commands, no eye contact, no casual conversation. When he tried to ask if I wanted coffee, I told him I already had one. When he commented on the weather, I ignored it. It wasn't fair to him. I knew that, but I couldn't stop myself. Every time I looked at him, I saw that man's hand on his arm, and it made my stomach twist. By the afternoon, the silence between us was heavy. Riku finally set down a folder on my desk with a bit more force than necessary. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. I looked up, keeping my face unreadable. Why do you ask? Because you've barely looked at me all day. Yesterday too, actually. You're different. His eyes searched mine, like he was trying to find an answer I wouldn't give. I forced my expression to stay cold. I've been busy. That's not it, he said quietly. I didn't respond. Couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I might say something I shouldn't. After a long moment, he sighed, picked up the empty coffee cup from my desk, and walked out of the office. The sound of the door closing felt too final. That night, I was at home, sitting in my penthouse with a glass of whiskey in my hand. The city lights spread out below me, but I barely noticed them. I had my phone in my other hand. My thumb hovered over the search bar. I told myself not to do it. It was childish, pathetic, and then I typed his name, Riku Hayashi. His profile appeared instantly. Public. Too public. The first few photos were harmless coffee cups, street views of Tokyo, snapshots of books he was reading. Then I found it. Picture from last night. Him and the same man from Roppongi. They were standing close together, both smiling, holding their drinks. The caption read, "Good to catch up after so long." My jaw tightened. University friend or not, the man had no business looking at Riku like that. I stared at the photo far too long. I zoomed in, my eyes tracing the way Riku's smile reached his eyes, the faint flush in his cheeks. He didn't smile like that in the office. Not at me. I set my glass down and leaned back, letting out a slow breath. I had no right to feel this way. No right to want to be the reason for that smile. But wanting it didn't stop me. If anything, it made me want it more. Shibuya Crossing at night was always a flood of light and noise. Neon signs blinked in every color. Music spilled from shop fronts, and a sea of people moved in all directions. I usually avoided it. Crowds were exhausting. But tonight, I was here because of a last-minute call from one of the company directors. It wasn't supposed to involve Riku. I'd left the event early, bored with the fake smiles and polite lies, when I caught sight of him across the street. He was leaving the same hotel where the company gathering had been held, walking quickly toward the train station. His black suit jacket hung open, his tie slightly loose. He looked relaxed, but in a way that made him seem more vulnerable. And then I saw them, the cameras. It started with 2 paparazzi, then 5, then more. They seemed to come out of nowhere, surrounding him, shouting questions over the noise of the street. "Are you dating the CEO of Hashikawa Holdings? Is this the man you've been seen with in Ginza? Smile for the camera, sweetheart." My chest tightened. I didn't even think. The driver had barely stopped the car before I was out, moving through the crowd. I heard Riku's voice, tense and confused, telling them to back off, that they'd made a mistake. The flashing bulbs lit his face in sharp, blinding bursts. I reached him in seconds. "Enough!" I snapped, my voice cutting through the noise. My hand found his wrist before he could even look up, and I pulled him toward me. His skin was warm under my grip, his pulse quick. The paparazzi shouted louder, the cameras clicking like a storm of insects. I didn't slow down. I opened the back door of the car, pulled him inside, and slammed it shut behind us. The glass blocked most of the noise, leaving only the sound of our breathing. I was still holding his wrist, too tightly. Riku's eyes were wide, his chest rising and falling fast. "Suda, don't let anyone touch you like that," I growled. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take them back. He blinked at me. "They didn't." "They did," I said sharply. "With their hands, with their words. They looked at you like you were..." I stopped, jaw tightening. Like I was what? His voice was soft, but there was something underneath it, something testing. I didn't answer. My grip loosened, but I didn't let go completely. The faint mark from my fingers on his wrist made me want to curse myself and pull him closer all at once. The driver started the car. The movement made Riku sway slightly toward me, his shoulder brushing mine. That small contact made my pulse spike. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air in the car felt thick. Riku finally shifted in his seat, looking at me from the corner of his eye. "You didn't have to come for me," he said quietly. "Yes, I said, my voice low. I did. He looked away, his gaze falling to my hand still resting against his. The corner of his mouth moved, almost like he wanted to smile but didn't dare. The city lights streaked across his face through the tinted window, highlighting his cheekbones, the faint curve of his lips. Thank you, he said after a while, his voice almost a whisper. I should have looked away. I didn't. You should know, I said, leaning in slightly. If this happens again, I won't be polite. His breath hitched, so faint I almost missed it. The rest of the ride passed in silence, but not the kind that was empty. It was the kind that made every second feel like it was pulling us somewhere dangerous. When we reached his building, I almost told the driver to keep going. I almost told him I wasn't finished. But I let Riku step out, my hand slipping from his wrist slowly, almost reluctantly. The warmth of his skin lingered long after he closed the door. The office felt too quiet. Only the ticking of the clock and the low hum of the city outside filled the space. The sun had gone down hours ago, leaving the tall windows dark, the glass reflecting the faint light from my desk lamp. I had stayed behind to work, or at least that was what I told myself. In truth, I stayed because I knew Riku would come. He always did when something bothered him, and I had been waiting, knowing that tonight, something would break between us. I was reading over some documents when I heard the door click shut. No knock, no polite pause, just the sound of him stepping inside and locking it. I didn't have to look up to know it was him. I could feel him. His presence was like a heat that filled the room, warm and restless. Suda. Rika's voice was low, sharp. We need to talk. I set the papers down slowly, keeping my face calm even though my chest felt tight. About what? Don't act like you don't know, he said, walking toward my desk. His steps were steady, but his hands were curled into fists at his sides. You've been hovering over me all week, following me, stopping me from going anywhere alone. Even at lunch, you sat there and watched me like I was a child. I kept my eyes on him. I'm looking out for you. You're suffocating me, he snapped. His voice rose, but not enough to echo. He didn't want anyone outside to hear. I can't even breathe without you being there. Why? Do you think I can't take care of myself? I pushed my chair back slowly and stood. This isn't about you not being able to take care of yourself. It's about me not trusting the people around you. That's not your decision to make. His jaw tightened, his eyes bright and angry. You don't own me, Suda. You can't control every move I make. I took a step toward him, but he didn't back away. His scent hit me. Clean, warm, with the faint trace of cologne he wore in the mornings. It made it harder to think clearly. I'm protecting you, I said quietly, because I care about you. Because what? He demanded. I didn't answer. My voice stuck in my throat. The space between us felt charged. My pulse was pounding. His lips were parted, his breathing uneven, and I could see it in his eyes. Frustration, yes, but something else too. Something that had been there for months, maybe years, but neither of us had dared to speak of it. You can't keep doing this, Rika said, but his voice had softened. His gaze flicked down to my mouth for the briefest second, then back to my eyes. You can't keep holding me so tight I can't move. The silence between us grew heavy. My hands curled at my sides. I was trying to hold myself back to keep my control. But the more I looked at him, the more I saw how close he was. The way the light from my desk lamp caught the lines of his face, the faint rise and fall of his chest. My control began to fray. You think I don't feel it too? He said suddenly, almost whispering. This thing between us? Those words hit me like a spark to dry wood. In one step, I was in front of him. I reached up, grabbed the silk of his tie in my fist, and pulled him forward. His breath caught, his eyes widened, and then I kissed him. First, it was slow, careful. My lips pressed to his like I was testing the shape of him, the taste of him. He didn't move for a second, but then his mouth softened under mine, and I felt him breathe against me. The kiss deepened. My hand slid up the tie to his collar, my fingers brushing the warmth of his throat. He made a sound, quiet, almost a sigh, and that was it. My control shattered. I pulled him closer, the chair behind him bumping his legs. His hands, tense at first, rose and gripped my shoulders, then slid into my hair, pulling me in as if he couldn't bear to let me go. My tongue brushed against his lips, and he let me in. The heat of him was overwhelming, his mouth, his breath, the way his body leaned into mine. Every movement felt like a confession we had been holding back for too long. We broke apart for a moment, both of us breathing hard. Our foreheads touched, and I could feel the small tremor in his body. "This is wrong," he whispered, though his hands didn't let me go. "Then tell me to stop," I said, my voice rough. He didn't, so I kissed him again, harder this time, urgent, desperate, the kind of kiss that said all the things I couldn't put into words. My hands gripped his waist, feeling the heat through his shirt, pulling him flush against me. His fingers curled into the back of my neck, and I felt the scrape of his nails. It sent a jolt straight down my spine. My breath came faster, my heart slamming in my chest. We moved without thinking, backward, forward, tangled. His back hit the edge of my desk, papers scattering to the floor, but neither of us cared. I pushed him up against it, caging him in with my body. The taste of him filled me. The warmth of him was addictive. I could feel every shift of his breath, every small movement. And under all of it was the pounding truth. I didn't want to let him go. Not now. Not ever. When we finally pulled apart again, the air between us felt thick. His lips were red, his eyes bright and unsteady. "We crossed the line," he said, but his voice was shaky, almost like he didn't believe his own words. "I know," I said, my voice low, "and I'm not sorry." He stared at me for a long moment, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. Then he looked away, his hands still clutching my shirt as if he couldn't make himself let go. "Riku," I said softly, but he shook his head, stepping back. His tie was still loose from where I had pulled it, his hair slightly mussed. He looked undone, and I knew I looked the same. He turned toward the door, but stopped with his hand on the knob. "This can't happen again," he said, his voice quiet. I didn't answer, because we both knew it was a lie. The rain hit the tall glass windows like 1,000 tiny drums, a steady, heavy sound that filled my penthouse. Outside, Tokyo's night lights glowed against the storm, their colors blurred by the rain. I had planned to drive Riku to the station after our meeting, but when we stepped into the lobby, the wind almost knocked him back. Lightning lit up the streets, and thunder rolled loud enough to shake the ground. I knew then I wouldn't let him leave. "Stay here tonight," I told him. My voice came out more firm than I expected, but I didn't want to give him a chance to argue. He frowned, looking out at the storm. "I'll be fine. It's just a train ride." "It's dangerous." I stepped closer, my eyes fixed on his. "I'm not letting you go out in that weather. I'd never forgive myself if something happened." There was a pause. His lips pressed together like he wanted to refuse, but the wind howled through the glass doors and his shoulders dropped. "Fine." I took his bag and led him to the elevator. The ride up was quiet, just the low hum of the motor and the faint sound of rain against the building. I could feel his presence beside me, warm, close, but I kept my hands in my pockets, forcing myself to stay calm. When we stepped into my penthouse, the soft light from the ceiling lamps greeted us. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood from the diffuser I always kept on. Riku walked to the wide windows, staring out at the storm as if he'd stepped into another world. "This view," he whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "It's beautiful." "Sit," I said gently, nodding toward the sofa. "I'll get us something warm." I went to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of sake, letting the heat from the small pot warm my hands. The smell of rice wine filled the air, smooth and calming. When I came back, he was curled on the sofa, legs tucked under him, his damp hair falling into his eyes. I handed him the cup, our fingers brushing. It was the lightest touch, but it sent a spark down my spine. He murmured a thanks and took a sip, closing his eyes for a moment as the warmth spread through him. We talked at first about work, the project we'd been struggling with, deadlines, schedules. But as the sake warmed us, the conversation shifted. He started asking questions about my life outside the office. "What about your family?" he asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I stared at the golden liquid in my cup for a moment. "They expect a lot from me, more than I can sometimes give. My father wants me to marry, to keep up appearances." Appearances? I took a deep breath. My chest felt tight, like the words I'd kept hidden for years were pressing to be free. He doesn't know, or maybe he does, but he pretends not to. I've never told him I'm attracted to men. It would ruin the image he's built for our family. Rika's gaze didn't waver. "So you hide it?" "Yes." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "For years. At work. At home. Everywhere. I learned to keep my distance from people I wanted, because wanting them would make everything harder." He didn't speak right away. His eyes softened, and I saw something there. Understanding, maybe even a quiet sadness. "That sounds lonely." "It is," I admitted. My voice came out low, almost a whisper. "But tonight, I don't feel as lonely." His breath caught just a little. My words hung between us, heavy and electric. The rain outside grew louder, like it wanted to fill the silence. I set my cup down on the table, leaning forward. "Riku." He looked up at me, eyes wide. There was no fear in them, only curiosity, maybe something more. I moved closer, slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. But he didn't. The space between us shrank until I could feel the heat from his body. My heart beat so hard it almost hurt. I reached out and brushed his hair back from his forehead, my fingers lingering for a second too long. He didn't move. I could smell his shampoo, fresh, clean, with a faint hint of citrus. I could see the way his throat moved when he swallowed. I leaned in, our faces so close I could feel his breath on my skin. The city lights painted his cheekbones in soft gold. His lips parted just slightly, and that was all it took for the last of my restraint to break. I kissed him. It was slow at first, tentative, like testing the warmth of water before diving in. His lips were soft, warm, and when he kissed me back, the tension I'd been carrying for months dissolved in an instant. The storm raged outside, but all I could hear was the sound of our breaths, the quiet slide of our lips against each other. I pulled back just enough to see his face. His cheeks were flushed, his eyes bright in the dim light. "Is this okay?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He nodded, almost shyly, and that was all I needed. This time, the kiss was deeper. My hand cupped his jaw, tilting his head so I could taste him fully. His fingers gripped the front of my shirt, pulling me closer until our chests touched. Heat bloomed between us, hotter than the sake, hotter than the air in the room. We moved without thinking, our bodies finding each other naturally. I shifted so I could lean him back against the sofa, my knees on either side of his thighs. The window behind us stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the storm and the glittering city below. Lightning flashed, casting us in silver light for a heartbeat. Then darkness, then the warm glow from the lamps again. My lips trailed from his mouth to his jaw, to the curve of his neck. His skin tasted faintly of rain from earlier, and I breathed him in like I'd been starved for this. His hand slid into my hair, holding me there, as if afraid I'd pull away. I whispered his name against his skin. "Riku." The sound of it made him shiver. His hands moved over my back, not hurried, just exploring, memorizing. Every touch felt like fire. I wanted to tell him how long I'd thought about this, how many nights I'd imagined what it would be like to have him here, in this room with the world shut out. But the words tangled in my throat, replaced by the press of my lips and the slow rhythm of our breathing. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep and low. Inside, we were warm, wrapped in the storm and each other. I don't know how long we stayed like that, kissing slowly, learning each other's pace. There was no rush, no need to prove anything. Just two people finally letting go of the walls they'd built. When we pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, and for a moment, I just looked at him. His eyes held something unspoken, something I didn't dare name yet, but it was enough to make my chest ache. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. I closed my eyes, letting those words sink deep into me. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, and maybe something even more dangerous. The ballroom smelled of money, power, and polished champagne glasses. Crystal chandeliers spilled gold light over the crowd, and the sound of slow music mixed with the hum of hushed conversations. Men in tailored suits stood near the bar. Women in sparkling dresses moved like living jewels, and everywhere I looked, there were sharp eyes waiting to judge, gossip, and strike. I hated events like this, but it was my company's gala, and my presence was non-negotiable. Still, tonight felt different, because he was here. Riku, my secretary. That was the word the media used. It was almost funny, because the title didn't even begin to explain what he was to me. He stood near the far side of the room, close to the long buffet table, his dark hair falling over one side of his face, his white shirt crisp under the soft lights. The black tie around his neck was perfectly straight, because I'd fixed it myself before we came here. And damn it, he looked like temptation given form. I could already hear the whispers starting the moment we walked in together. Is that the new secretary? He's different from the others, isn't he? No one has ever stayed at Suta's side this long. They thought I couldn't hear, but I always did. I ignored them, at least I told myself I would, until I saw him. A middle-aged investor, one of those types who always believed money made him untouchable, leaned toward Riku as they spoke. At first, I thought nothing of it. Riku was polite to everyone, even the people who didn't deserve it. But then the man laughed too loudly, moved closer, and I saw his hand start to reach out. His fingers hovered above Riku's shoulder like he owned the right to touch him. My blood turned hot. No, not here. Not in front of me. I was moving before I realized it, cutting across the floor like the crowd didn't exist. My shoes made no sound against the marble, but in my chest, my heart pounded hard enough to hurt. The man's hand was just about to land when I stepped between them. "Excuse me," I said, my voice flat but sharp, the kind of tone that made people freeze without knowing why. The man looked startled, then smiled like he could hide his guilt. "Ah, Suda, I didn't let him finish." I turned to Riku, and without thinking, I reached for his hand. The moment my fingers wrapped around his, I felt him tense. His palm was warm, soft, and smaller than mine, and even though we'd touched 100 times before, this time was different. I didn't just hold him, I kept holding him. Around us, the room seemed to stop. The soft music kept playing, but it felt distant now. I could see the flash of cameras from the corner of my eye. I could hear the whispers starting again, louder this time, sharper, heavier with meaning. Riku's eyes met mine, wide, questioning. His lips parted slightly, like he wanted to speak, but I tightened my grip just enough to make sure he didn't pull away. The pushy investor's fake smile faltered. "I didn't mean. I'm sure you didn't." I cut in, my voice still calm, but I didn't look at him. My gaze stayed on Riku, like no one else in the room mattered. In truth, no one else did. I let the silence drag just long enough for every camera to click, for every person to see exactly what I was doing. Then I spoke, not to Riku, not to the investor, but to the room. "He's with me." It was simple, direct, but it carried the weight of a claim, a warning, and a promise all at once. Riku blinked, his cheeks flushing a deep red. His free hand brushed against the side of his suit jacket, like he didn't know what to do with himself. I could feel the slight tremble in his fingers where they rested in my palm, but he didn't try to pull away. Around us, the sound of gossip rose like a wave. "Did you hear that?" He said it out loud. "No one has ever." I didn't care about their shock. This wasn't for them. It was for me, and for him. I lowered my voice so only Riku could hear. "You're mine. I don't care if the whole world knows it." His breath caught, and he looked away quickly, as if the weight of my words was too much for him. But I saw the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the way the corner of his lips almost lifted. The investor muttered something and walked away, but I barely noticed. My attention was still on Riku, On the way, the warm light from the chandelier softened his sharp features, making his dark eyes glow. I should have let go. I didn't. We stood there, in the middle of the ballroom, while every camera, every reporter, every jealous pair of eyes watched us. My thumb brushed slowly against the side of his hand, a small, hidden movement no one else could see. He shivered. God, I wanted to kiss him right there, but I didn't yet. Instead, I leaned closer, my lips near his ear. Let them look, Riku. Let them understand. He swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. You're making a scene. I smiled slightly, the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. Good. Because if I didn't do this now, if I didn't make it absolutely clear, someone else would try again. And I wasn't the type of man who gave warnings twice. From that moment on, I didn't let go of his hand for the rest of the night. Not while I spoke to the board members. Not while I gave my short speech from the stage. Not even when we stood near the balcony for fresh air. Every time someone looked, I made sure they saw it, his hand in mine. Every time someone whispered, I made sure they knew it was true. By the end of the night, it wasn't just gossip. It was a fact. Riku was mine, and I wasn't letting go. If you felt that too, then hit subscribe to Cherryboyhearts BL. Stay with us for the next kiss, the next breath, the next heartbeat, because our story is just getting started. Your support means a lot to us. Please subscribe.